Hello, everyone, and this is Sresh from Team FLQL and FundaesLiga's Quiz League to tell you about QELO, our new points system, or QELO score, which will now determine how players are placed on the leaderboard and how they collect points through the season. And this will be implemented from May 29th onwards when we start the 5th season of our flagship FLQL Mimic Quiz League. Little bit more. Why not remind you how the previous point system looked, where we rewarded wins to the top two players. As you can see here, Samant and Adam have come first and second, and so they've collected one win each, while we also gave players points, and this was used to determine the leaderboard. And this is how the leaderboard looked, where we saw that players were placed on the leaderboard based on their wins. If there was a ties in the wins, then their points were taken into consideration. If there was a tie there as well, then we should take own corrects and so on. And now we come to our new addition, that's the QELO score. So what is a QELO score, you may ask, of course. So to define it, we would call it a single number that takes into consideration multiple variables to better represent every quizzer's performance completely in a game week. QELO scores are then put in descending orders to determine the leaderboard of the game of that week and of course of the whole season as a whole. And then also it can be used for future matchups, who you play next. So just soak it in again. A QELO score is a single number that takes into consideration many variables to better represent a quizzer's score for a game week. Of course, we'll explain everything as we move along. So first, you may ask, why is FLQL changing its point system? Well, in our old system, where players lost or won fairly close matches, they were being rewarded or hurt disproportionately compared to the closeness and competitiveness of the game scores. Just think it through. Imagine a player comes third or comes tied third by just 1 point behind a player who has come second. In our old system, that player was collecting 0 wins. Is that accurate? Is that right? When you think it through with our 6 seasons of experience, 4 of FLQL and 2 of Flames, we've realized it's probably not accurate. Even the person who has come tied third deserves some points to take home. And similarly, it can work in opposite manner as well. Is that a player, if he or she has an extremely dominant performance, that will also reflect. Second point, keeping a small digit like wins, as you saw in the leaderboard previously, as the primary leaderboard, the main differentiator in the leaderboard, means that players were tied on that same win scores. So what does that mean? That meant what was happening is we had players on, say, 3 or 4 wins on ranked between tiers 6 to 11 or 6 to 12. That was the variance in tiers of players who were on 3 or 4 wins, around 50, 60 players. Is that accurate? Probably not. A player who might be in tier 11, probably just due to some randomness of their game weeks, is in tier 11 when they could have been, say, in tier 6 or tier 7 on the same number of wins. And finally, it is to reward players for their match performance and not just their match results. So even if you come third, I mean, sure, that may be disappointing to you on the day, but if it's a close game, if you've done well, you will be rewarded for it. You will not go home with just 0 wins. Similarly, if you come tied second, or if you come second by a big margin, fourth by a close margin, first by a big margin, all of these factors will be considered when we're giving the QELO scores. And this is why we are changing our point system. So let's illustrate it with some few examples. So in the old scoring system, you can see I showed an example previously where someone with 18 points collected 1 win and Adam with 14 points collected 1 win. But you can see Tejasvi with 13, which is quite a good score, just 1 behind second, took home 0 wins. Similarly, Mick also took home 0 wins when he did fairly well in this game. Now with the QELO rating under the new system in the bottom, you can see that every player has got their own ELO score for the game week, based on the performance. And this is that takeaway from the end of the game. Not previously how we had wins as 0-1, 0-1. The ELO score is the takeaway. Second example, you can see that probably justice is served to the player who came third, who played really well, but probably definitely deserved more than 0 wins in our previous system. Second example, you can see a tied game here where Vineet has won with 15 points in the previous system and collected 1 win, while Blair and Giant have tied second and have taken half a win, which is a factor of half of what Vinny has earned. But you can see that Blair and Giant have answered way more than half of what Vinny has scored. So do they deserve just half a win? And similarly with Anush, who has got 7 answers here. Does he deserve 0 wins? Probably not. And that is why the ELO scores work so well, because it does justice to the scores which the players have got, and not just how they have finished on the leaderboard in a 4-match competition, which can be fairly randomized. It can be a factor of many reasons why you are playing that opponent on that game week. Similarly, now the leaderboard, you can see how it will look. The arrow on the top will show you that average kilo will then determine what is the leaderboard for every game week and the season as a whole. We'll put every player's game week kilo scores, and the average of that will be the total and the average. They're both the same thing, but average is a much shorter number, so we'll use that to determine how the leaderboard looks like. Of course, if the average kilo is tied for players, then we'll use the owns to determine who comes next and correct answers and so on. You'll see that as the season starts. So what is the kilo score again? You tell me. You asked, sorry. And it's basically the score you got, plus we add some things to it. And the things we add to it are the competitiveness factor and the completeness factor, which is essentially what was the difference between first, second, third, and fourth in that game, or between first and second, second and third, third and fourth, of course, and factor that in, and we give a ratio or a number to it. And then the completeness, that is how many questions went unanswered or answered in the whole game, to also determine, to give some reward in games to players where there are more answers given compared to games where fewer answers were given. If you want a more detailed explanation behind the kilo scoring system, we have it all written out for you. Just go to tinyurl.com/kilo explanation to find out more about who has come up with it and what more is taken into account. Now, of course, all of you, change is always nice, but sometimes it's hard to move away from change. And I'm sure many of you will feel that the previous one was a better point system, or this one is a better point system. And we're sure that there are many thoughts on this. We've also debated long and hard about this, but we think it is time for a move away from our previous point system, basically to reward players as a whole. And the previous point system worked when it worked, and now it's time to move ahead and into the future and go in this direction. So thanks for listening to our explanation. And if you have more questions, of course, feel free to let us know on Facebook and other places, and we'll try to explain better, and we'll try to answer those queries that you might have. And just a reminder before we sign off that May 29th is when FLQL starts. We have 2 tracks, international and India. You can sign the QR code to sign up, or if you already have signed up, maybe there's a link waiting in your email with complete registration. And for all those who have already done the needful, we are very excited to host season 5 of FLQL after a fairly long break in 2023 for us to all get rejuvenated. And we hope you all have a lovely, lovely time in this season. Thank you. Take care.